Hey Gym Rats, welcome to the first of hopefully many AMAs / webinars / podcasts, whatever you want to call this new look version of the AMAs. My name is Robert Moyer, a fitness and nutrition consultant from the UK, but you probably know me better as the Gainsloth, one of the trainers in this server that's been here for a good few years now. So we decided to run these pre-recorded rather than live like the last series to give all of our trainers across the globe the opportunity to take part at a time that makes the most convenient sense for them, as well as for you guys to be able to kind of dip in and out at a time that makes sense for you. There's no pressure to attend these live, considering how global we are as a community. And also, one of the pieces of feedback we also had last time was that you wish there was somewhere central for the past AMAs to be stored so that you could come back and rewatch. And whilst doing it this way does kind of lose that live interactivity that we had before, everyone still gets an opportunity to participate and send in those questions. So I think it's a win-win for everyone ultimately. So how these will work going forward is you, the Gym Rats community, will have an opportunity on a weekly basis to submit topics, ideas that will take up the main bulk of the recording. In this instance, I've picked general fitness and nutrition tips, but going forward you may pick a specific nutrition topic or programming or training or myth that you want busted or scientific concept that you want to have expanded. Whichever topic is the most popular, we will get the appropriate trainer to put together one of these as a 10 to 15 minute podcast style presentation a week, hopefully once a week, ideally 3 times a week, but let's just see how we get going. This is a new idea after all. But we also still want additional questions from you guys to give us the opportunity to ask and answer literally anything. So the second half of these recordings will be your questions answered in as much detail as the trainer feels appropriate. So slightly more refined than last time, but hopefully easier for more of you to get involved and benefit from. With that out of the way, let's dive into today's topic, which was basic but important fitness and nutrition information. So once again, if you don't know who I am a fitness and nutrition consultant based out of the UK, younger in this game than many, but I've been here longer than most influencers. I have a sports science degree, nutrition certifications, PT Certs, CPDs, and have coached hundreds of Gen Pop clients over the years. I'm clearly not a bodybuilder, I'm definitely not a power lifter, but I do get people where they need to be. Some of you in this server are former clients and some of you are existing clients, so hopefully you get an understanding of how I approach training, especially with how I've interacted with many of you across this server over the last few years. But if you are looking for bodybuilding or sport specific information, we have got trainers out there that can talk to those elements much better than myself, and a lot of them are part of the trainer team. But I wanted to talk to the Gen Pop average community member out there for this talk. So the topic of this episode was advertised as basic but important fitness and nutrition information. But actually, as I prepped this, I realized the actual title or subject should have actually been how to keep things simple, stupid. Because so many of you out there in the community, and there's 30-odd thousand of you, are just in your own way, overcomplicating things, suffering from paralysis from analysis. And to be fair to a lot of you, the reasons are largely out of your control. They're not your fault. You're surrounded by so much noise and conflicting information. Literally just yesterday, a client of mine that I've been working with for a minute now, and who started to finally see a lot of consistent progress and results after years of struggling, they messaged me asking me about some fringe topic or training style that they saw on an Instagram reel and wondered if that's how they should actually be approaching things, completely throwing away and disregarding potentially the work that we've done up to that point. It took them literally 90 seconds to consider deviating from a plan that's been working. You're bombarded by so much from all angles, whether it's the algorithm working against you, grifters, whatever it is that you want to blame, all working against you. So I get it, and believe me when I say that real success comes from doing the boring things consistently. The majority of my clients are like traveling business consultants, C-level execs, healthcare workers who can't, due to their jobs that keep them working for 18-hour days or traveling to different countries each week, literally can't stress about worrying about too many different things. They need simple plans that they can repeat or pick up and drop into different environments or gyms or routines. So I understand the basics that you need to master to make serious progress. So please learn from this, do follow this for years, and you'll be just fine. So let's dive into it. And the first point I want to make is pick up big rocks, not little ones. What does that mean? Aptly, the first thing that I want you to learn is about mindset rather than nutrition or physicality. It needs to be your mindset, and you need to fix it. The person that I am speaking to right now needs to fix your mindset and focus on the things that give you the biggest return and investment, not 100 little things that might give you an edge, especially when you haven't mastered that foundational stuff. Oftentimes that means just doing enough, not too much. One of the greatest strength coaches of our time, Dan John, often says, enough is enough, more is just more. But isn't more great, I hear you probably saying out there. I mean, sure, when it's money, yeah. Sure, more money is amazing. When it's everything else, more is largely just more work. Put the work in, sure, right? But put the work in where it matters the most. So when we're talking about picking up the big rocks, what we're saying is obviously put in the effort and lift heavy. But I'm also referring to this metaphor, which is if I was to ask you to pick up as much weight as possible in rocks in 10 seconds, would you scrounge about the floor looking and picking up and pocketing as many pebbles as possible in that 10 seconds, or would you spend that time looking for the biggest, largest, heaviest rock? So 1 over 100. Focus on the 1 or 2 things that you can change, that you can get the biggest return on investment from. Look for those big rocks and just hone in on them. Just do that. Just do enough. Enough is enough. More is just more work. And with that, let me get you started on some big rocks that you can focus on right now. Firstly, and point number 2, but first in the actual training, is you really just need to focus on 5 movements. Chances are you just really want to get generally fit. Remember, this is a basics lesson. I'm not talking about people looking to hop on stage or a platform and take home worlds, right? I'm just focusing on you guys, you 99% of you that are just looking to get generally fit, right? Chances are you just want to get a little bit stronger or significantly stronger, but you just want to get stronger or fitter or bigger than you are right now. You just want to progress a bit further than you are right now. You don't necessarily want to get sculpted. You don't necessarily want a 500 deadlift or whatever. You may think that you want to be C-bum, but 99% of you just want to get a little bit jacked. And chances are you also have a ton of noise coming at you from social media contradicting each other on how to approach that. And what I mean by that is approaching that in different splits, different routines, different training styles. Every week something new comes along and you might want to jump on that or wonder if what you're doing today is enough to get you just generally fitter, stronger, healthier. So let me clear it up for you. At its most basic level, training, resistance training, just comes down to 5 movements. That's all resistance training is built on. It's if you're doing those 5 movements, you're doing enough. Just keep doing that. Some people, including my own training team, may challenge that a bit, challenge that number, challenge the list I'm about to give you. But to me, it boils down to simply pushing, pulling, squatting, hinging. That's literally it. pushing, pulling, squatting, hinging. But Sloth, you said 5 movements, that's only 4. Arguably, to me, the most important is the 5th one, which is loaded carrying, so weighted walks. But that one's kind of fairly optional, but I always lump it in there because I think everyone should do weighted carries. You could also add a 6th in there, which is just brackets everything else, which is arms, forearms, calves, whatever. But I like to keep it simple, obviously. So you're looking at pushing, pulling, squatting, hinging, and loaded carries. When you're in your first few years of lifting, especially if you're young as well and have barely gotten started, adding load to those 5 movement patterns will blow you up. Because of this basic principle, any program that has you doing this will work across any split, across any frequency. Right now, right this second, you do not need to worry about anything else. As long as you're pushing, pulling, squatting, hinging, and walking with load, you're absolutely fine. Full body, PPL, upper lower, Arnold, GCCLP, it does not matter. If you do those things and you repeat those things and you lift heavier weekly or every other week doing those things, you will be fine, because all programs are basically built from that. It doesn't matter if you are incline benching or flat benching. It doesn't matter if all you want to do is overhead press as your pushing movement. It doesn't matter if you are hex pressing or cable pressing. Although it kind of slightly does matter if you're hex pressing because it's a genuinely inferior movement. But you get my point. It's all noise. As long as you are pushing in some fashion across multiple sets and reps and overloading over time, you are going to get bigger, you're going to get stronger. But leads me on to number 3, that you have to put in the effort in every rep. You may have seen me say in the server sometimes when someone asks us some kind of question, I may occasionally respond with, have you tried trying? Because you have to put the effort in. You have to try and put effort in. Lift big, get big. Work hard. It doesn't matter whether you're lifting across 3 sets or 4 or across 8 reps or 10, so long as those sets and those reps have effort behind them. As long as they're pushed close to failure, as long as you're actually trying, you're lacing up your shoes, grabbing your rucksack, walking into the gym, sitting down at a machine or a bench or a rack and lifting with intention, you will build muscle off the back of it. It doesn't matter across what sets or what reps. People come into the service so often and say, how many sets, how many reps should I be doing for X, Y, and Z? 2, 3, 4, doesn't matter. We just want to see effective reps. We just want to see reps where you have put the effort in, sets where you've put the effort in. If you're going to do 2, make sure those 2 count. If you're going to do 3, make sure those 3 count. If you want to do 8 reps, if you want to do 10 reps, 12, 15, 20, doesn't matter so long as what you're doing matters, as long as it counts, as long as it has intention behind it. That's all I'm going to say about that. Moving over to nutrition for a bit. Point number 4. Eat big, get big. Eat small, get small. If you want to get big, you need to eat in a calorie surplus. If you want to shed fat, you need to eat in a calorie deficit. And if you want to stay the same, eat at maintenance. These are pretty much fundamental laws of the universe. The easiest way to do this is to track your calories. If that doesn't trigger you in any way, if that doesn't cause you any issues, any mental strain, everyone should track their calories. I think it's super helpful, super important, unless you have a reason why you shouldn't, in which case you can do it a bit intuitively. Use something like a TDEE calculator to get a sense of your maintenance. Eat according to your goals, as in surplus, maintenance, deficit, and just see how your body reacts over time. But don't get too obsessive about the number, though, as in the intake and especially the output. Every body works differently and cannot be predicted based on a calculation, and there's such a large margin of error with these calculations. There's no point getting hung up on the individual calorie. So if you're tracking your progress, give it a few weeks. See how your weight responds, see how your body responds, and if the scales don't move the way you want them to, adjust your intake until it does. But if you want to get big, you have to eat big, and if you're not getting big, you're not eating big enough, and vice versa. So keep an eye on that scale weight, track those calories if you can, but don't get super obsessive. Just eat big, eat small, get small. prioritize protein. Now, some people may be surprised to not see this one higher up because obviously protein is a massive talking point in this industry, and it is a reason because it's super important. But still, if you need to eat protein if you want to see consistent progress. Training stimulus is obviously one important factor, but that does not matter if your protein intake isn't accounted for, and vice versa. You could be focusing on protein, but if you're not providing enough stimulus, nothing will matter. These two things work synergistically. So to figure out your protein needs, multiply your weight in kilograms by any number between 1.6 and 2 to get your total daily intake in grams. So if you're 60 kgs, multiply that by 1.6 or 2. If you multiply that by 2, you're going to have to eat 120 grams of protein a day. Can't do quick enough maths at this hour to figure out the 1.6 calculation, but anywhere in that range, right? Anywhere between 80 to 120 grams of protein is enough for a 60 kg person. Just change that number depending on your weight. But just pick a number. Again, similar to the calorie topic just a second ago, don't get super hung up on, per gram of protein. Like, as long as it's around about your target, it doesn't matter if you come under, especially doesn't matter if you go over. Just try and pick a number, keep it simple, keep it consistent. Now, those two nutrition topics might seem super basic and super high level, considering that this is an AMA and I have an opportunity to go into a lot of detail here, but those two are specifically simple. You all should know it, but a surprising amount of you don't. And there's even bigger number of you don't really know this next point, which is you need to eat like an adult. Once you've got a calorie target to follow and a protein target to follow, the remainder of your calories can be split up between carbs and fats in a way that makes sense to you. Doesn't matter if you follow keto, paleo, Mediterranean, or if you intermittent fast. All of those diets have their place and they matter. But the effect that they have on your body will remain the same for the most part, no matter what diet you follow. They all do the same thing from a body fat perspective. They might do something slightly differently metabolically, but also it could be argued that that slight difference doesn't really make a difference. It just makes your body dependent on carbohydrates or fats for the majority of its energy. But largely, it doesn't matter from a performance standpoint. However, this is probably my most important nutrition lesson I could leave you with, especially in a basics lesson, and that is you have to eat like an adult. Well, what do I mean by that? Eat as balanced as you possibly can whilst prioritizing your protein intake. Eat your vegetables. Definitely eat your fiber. Eat your fruits. Don't just eat chicken and rice. Diversify your diet. Experiment. Learn how to cook and make interesting meals. Ensure your body is getting as much of the other nutrients as it possibly can and a diverse spread of them. Obviously watch your added sugar intake, but also don't stress about every gram of sugar every day. Just approach this like an adult. Especially don't argue with strangers online about which diet is better, because as I mentioned at the top, they all serve a purpose, and fighting about each other's eating habits, especially online, is largely cringe. Be an adult about it, and more importantly, eat like one. If you don't know how to cook, learn how to cook. It's really easy to just Google recipes online. Make sure you're not just eating chicken and rice. Give your body the diverse range of nutrients that it craves. Gut health is a thing. Your gut microbiome is fueled by diverse diets. So just make sure you're giving the body what it needs. One more point, and that is you need to walk more. Get your steps in. You don't want to simply rely on that 1 hour that you've spent in the gym 3 or 4 times a week as your only movement. If you're sedentary the other 23 hours of the day, you're getting net negative health benefits. So you need to walk more. Aim for a step target and make sure that you hit that daily. That target doesn't have to be huge. Take your current step count and add 2,000 steps a day to it. So it doesn't matter if that totals 4,000, 6,000, 8,000, 10,000. It definitely doesn't have to be 10,000 steps a day, but just make sure you're moving outside of the gym. If you have weight loss goals, this will do so much to benefit those, but it also just benefit your overall health and mental well-being if you spend time walking outside, if it's safe for you to do so. And if you add loaded carries or weighted walks to that, you'll also just benefit your cardiovascular health, your heart health, your strength in general will just skyrocket from that. Just keep yourself active outside of the gym. Make it a part of your personality and it will pay dividends. I think that was it. I think that's all that I really should say, because I don't want to overcomplicate this, especially in a basics and simplicity simplifying webinar or podcast or whatever you want to call this. There's just so much that I could add, but just reverting back to point number one, and the reason is at the start, is you need to make that biggest bang for your buck. So I don't want to add any more noise to what you've already got. So to recap, and for you to take away, if you're looking to get started, or you're looking to change your approach, or you're looking to simplify things, or strip back a routine that's currently super messy, pick up your big rocks, not your little ones. Focus on pushing, pulling, squatting, hinging, and weighted carries. All routines, all splits, all programs are basically built from that. So if you're doing that, you're doing fine. But also put in the effort with every rep. Make sure that what you're doing is being done with intention, close to failure. There's one thing I used to always say, which is just make sure you're in the set when you're working out. So you're not distracted by anything else. Got your headphones in when you're saying, right, you need to get back on the bench to do another 8 to 10 reps. Just make sure that you're only focused on that 8 to 10 reps at that point in that set. You're not distracted by any of the noise around you in the gym. So put the effort in with every rep. Eat big, get big. Eat small, get small. Prioritize your protein, but more importantly, eat like an adult. Diversify. Make sure it's not just chicken and rice and broccoli. Make sure that you're learning how to cook, adding seasoning, just being an adult about your diet. And finally, walk more and do more weighted carries and weighted walks if you can. Commit to those things for 12 months and come back to me and tell me that you didn't make significant gains. Simply focus on that alone. I dare you to do so. But I hope that gets you started. Remember, this is for beginners who want to get generally fit and strong and healthier. You do not need to complicate it any further than this. But if you are a bodybuilder, power lifter, power builder, high rocks athlete, kettlebell fella, whatever, and you want topics and discussion, make a suggestion and we'll make sure one of the training team records that. But that's what I want to talk about in this main section. But you guys had some questions, so let's get into the Ask Me Anything, the AMAs, those questions. So starting off at the top, Mally wanted to know more about muscle protein synthesis off the back of a conversation we had a few days ago. Specifically, what is it, how do you utilize it, and basically wanting to know all about it at a surface level with current studies. So this is a tricky one to give a high level or surface level, whatever way you want to phrase that, overview, whilst also talking about the current literature. And what I mean by that is talking about the literature in any way stops it from being a simple conversation. So I'm probably going to just stick with the simplification of this. So at its core, muscle protein synthesis is essentially one of the thousands, and I truly mean thousands, of metabolic processes in the body, and it takes the amino acids from dietary protein and converts it into new muscle tissue. That's it at its simplest, right? It's just taking the dietary protein and taking the amino acids, converting it into new muscle tissue. But we also have the opposing metabolic process called muscle protein breakdown, which does the opposite. So that breaks down muscle tissue, and is what you kind of get when you go into a catabolic state, is what breaking down your muscle tissue. Now, both processes, though, occur relatively simultaneously throughout the day. We can stimulate or spike both to occur more than others, with our preferred outcome being the stimulation of muscle protein synthesis pathways more than muscle protein breakdown. And we can spike MPS in multiple ways, including through exercise and consuming protein. Both have a stimulating effect. with exercise giving more of an effect than protein. So to answer your question of how do we utilize MPS, we essentially spike the pathway through resistance training and consuming our protein. Exercise spiking it more, protein certainly playing a part, as I mentioned. But specifically, I think it's leucine, that is the amino acid that spikes MPS. Now, studies have observed MPS in many ways, and it's difficult in this format to cover it in a way that does it justice in the time we have available to us, though. So what I can say is that one of the reasons why we talk about the most important part of your protein intake being your total daily intake, and the second important part being spreading that across the days, it's because it repeatedly spikes muscle protein synthesis. If you look at some of the studies we have on those who intermittent fast or are on OMAD, or 1 meal a day, if you consume all of your protein in a smaller window, it seems to have comparable, though slightly lesser, hypertrophic effects as spreading that across the whole day. So one of the ways we can manipulate muscle protein synthesis is ensuring that we spread out our protein intake and we get that spike through dietary protein throughout the day, essentially giving us a net positive muscle protein synthesis result and comparing it against muscle protein breakdown. I think it's quite complex to go into it in any more detail, but I think that's all you really need to know going to the topic at hand, right? Keeping things simple. All you really need to know is you can spike it through resistance training and dietary protein. If you want to spike it anymore or manipulate it, just make sure you spread out your protein intake throughout the day. Path wanted to know, does calisthenics build more muscle compared to normal gym lifting? Specifically, what's better? So as with any question relating to the gym, the answer will often be depends. But let me first be direct. The answer is probably going to be resistance training, as in weightlifting, lifting weights. The reason being, it's easier to progressively overload at a greater magnitude when you can just add more weight to a bar or pick up a heavier dumbbell or kettlebell or whatever. With calisthenics or bodyweight stuff, it's kind of more difficult to overload at the same rate. You're largely reliant on reps or skills to progress over time, with maybe the option for adding like weighted vests or backpacks or anything like that. But with lifting, you just simply pick up a heavier weight, a plate, bar, or whatever, and go on your way. So lifting weights is probably objectively the answer to this question. But that being said, the answer can also be whichever you commit to the most. So calisthenics isn't necessarily inferior. I'd hate to call any training style inferior, but it's less likely to build quote unquote more muscle in a short amount of time. Path also asked, is it easier for skinny people to be lean? Now, I'm assuming they mean, is it easier for skinny people to have a lower body fat percentage? The answer is obviously going to be absolutely. I was initially going to say something along the lines of they're already skinny, so obviously the answer is yes. But this also leads into actually a great discussion on the effects of leanness on people who were previously overweight or obese. So if you've previously carried around a lot of body fat, when you lose that fat, you still have all of the fat cells. It's just their fatty acids have been depleted as a result of that calorie deficit. Think of it like bubbles accumulating on top of each other. When you add more fat mass, you're adding more fat cells or bubbles to fill those out with fatty acids. When you diet down, you might think you're popping all those bubbles and getting rid of all that fat and any trace of it. But actually, the fat cells themselves remain. So someone who diets down from 100 kilos to 70 would have more fat cells than those who are originally and currently still 70 kilos. So those formerly overweight people will be battling more hormonal signaling from the empty fat cells, demanding that you fill those cells and get big again. So they're like constantly getting those hunger signals. So to answer if it's easier for a skinny person to be lean, the answer is absolutely, especially if they've never been fat before. Someone who's skinny and lean but has previously been fat would actually find it objectively more difficult to stay lean because, like I say, they're battling all of those challenges, that food noise, those psychological challenges, and also physical drives as well, and essentially would be at a greater risk of putting that weight back on because of it. So, fantastic question. Probably put more into that answer than you were expecting. Probably went off on a bit more of a tangent than you were expecting, but I just had to take the opportunity to talk about that. Frosty asked a bunch of questions, which I'm going to try and quick fire answer simply for time, because I've been at this for half an hour now. So apologies if you wanted more explanations than what I'm about to give. Just if you do ping me in the server, I'm more than happy to go into more detail via text at a more convenient time. How do you get yourself back into the habit of working out after you stop for a while? The answer is simply just do it. That might be a bad answer, but you just have to do it. You have to find a way. I can't really gift you any way of doing it. You just need to find your own way. That first session back will always be the hardest. Subsequent ones will be much easier, so you just get that hard one out of the way in a way that makes sense to you. Commit to one exercise, for example. Maybe just if you've got a program you want to try but you just can't get back into the habit, just pick one exercise or one set or whatever. Just say you're going to do one set of everything, be out in 10 minutes. Just whatever it helps you get that foot in the door. Do that. Every following session will be much easier. So just build from there. How do you build more leg muscles to get more explosive jumping power? Two kind of different things. So power is a skill trained specifically for power. It doesn't necessarily and simply and only come from the amount of muscle you have in a specific area. So you build leg muscles by doing more leg work. I choose like compounds, like squats specifically, or squat patterns, to build more power, do more power work, like plyometrics, or explosive compound exercise, do explosive squats, like try and launch yourself out of the hole, or whatever. It's a skill. It's not necessarily tied to the size of your legs. If you want power, train for power. How do you keep your size even though your diet or plan is starting to get boring, like losing motivation, if that makes sense? I revert back to the answer I gave, or the halfway through this main section. Eat like an adult. Vary your diet, diversify your diet, learn how to cook new meals. Just eat whatever you fancy eating within your calorie and macro balance. Just experiment. You keep your size by eating the calories. It doesn't matter what your calories are or what they're made up of. Calories are calories. Diet is burning. If the diet is boring, learn to cook more interesting food. Follow-up question, is it better to keep more belly fat weight and just maintain arms and go on a regular diet? I don't really know what this question is asking. Is it better to keep more, quote, belly fat weight and just maintain arms and go on a regular diet? I don't know what you're asking. Belly fat is arguably the worst fat, especially if we're talking about visceral fat. If your fat accumulates more in your midsection, that's not actually a good thing. Dieting down if I had a massive belly and not much else. I don't know how it ties into arms and regular diet. So again, just eat like an adult. If you're bulking, you don't necessarily need to. If you're trying to put on size, you don't necessarily need to get quote unquote fat. I would just bring those calories down or diet down if I had a massive midsection. But that was the last question I had. Brings us to the end of this section, or this whole session. So it's 35 minutes. It's not bad going. I really hope you enjoy these. I hope you enjoy this new format. I hope you enjoyed the fact that you can rewatch this. If you have any suggestions or ideas for the next session, open up some kind of channel, poll or whatever to try and gather that information and gather those suggestions. We'll vote on, we'll pick the best one, get then another trainer in, or it might be myself, and then we'll open up another thread to get more questions. If you've got any feedback on how this is run, if you want to do things differently, if you have different suggestions, just let us know, right? This is brand new. This is a new way of doing this. We want to give as much value back to you guys as we possibly can. This is for you, essentially. So if you want this to be different, if you have any suggestions, any feedback, let us know. But if you have a suggestion or questions, we'll see you in the next one. And if you have any questions for me, obviously ping me and the rest of the team in the server. Otherwise, happy lifting, guys.